Welcome, friends, to the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And we are off this week. James is doing some traveling. We're taking a moment to recalibrate. But we're releasing this former Patreon exclusive episode we did on The Haunting, which is an adaptation of The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah, a strange one, too. Jan de Bont, Owen Wilson, and Liam Neeson, Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yeah.
It's a wacky one.
What an interesting cast.
But a project that we've had a fun history with, covering the book and
for sure
multiple adaptations now.
Love that book. Yeah, there's a lot of adaptations. So yeah, this is an interesting one. Definitely enjoy it. I did want to go ahead and say that we intended to release our usual Patreon exclusive this month in March. Well, I guess it'll be April by the time you hear this. But our March release was scheduled, but I got the flu, and we had a very narrow window to record. I ended up being quite sick and decided to spare everybody's ears with my hoarse voice and wait on it. So we will be recording and releasing an episode on the Herzog Nosferatu coming up shortly, and then making up for it, and then trying to catch back up with an April release and stuff. But we'll get back on track.
Yeah. Anyway, we hope you enjoy this previous Patreon exclusive. This month we are talking The Haunting, but it's not the 1962-63 version we've done before as a bonus episode. It's actually the 1999 version, directed by Jan de Bont.
This feels very throwback now because we've been doing video on the main feed, and right now we're just doing audio, like the olden days.
Yeah.
This movie, I wanted to talk to you about it because this is something I saw when it came out. I think I saw it in the theater, 1999. And I have not seen it since. So we're talking almost 25 years ago now. But you had never seen it. So this was my like wispy through the mists of time memory, which, as we well know on the podcast, is not great. Versus you had never seen it. Since seeing this originally, I have read the novel that it's based off of twice. I have watched the 50s, or is it 1960s, something like that, the older black and white version of The Haunting. Seen that a couple times now.
63.
Yeah. And we covered The Haunting of Hill House, the Flanagan adaptation. So I have so much more context for what this story is and what they chose to do with it. So it's really, really a much different viewing this time. But what did you think of this thing? What did you have like expectations going in? Or were you kind of a blank slate?
I did have expectations. I'd heard that it's bad. You kind of mentioned it's bad multiple times throughout the podcast. And just to say, like, I didn't know what to think about the 63 film, but in watching it and then doing the research about it, come to find that it's this incredible horror film. Classic. A lot of like Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg.
We were fans watching it.
Yeah, I loved it. And but those filmmakers say it's like one of the scariest movies of all time, one of their favorite movies. So, and like in looking at the craft that was put into that film and directed by Robert Wise, who's like The Sound of Music and these like other massive films, seeing a movie from the 60s that still holds up and it's like stands tall on its own in comparison even to Shirley Jackson's work, which is monumental. Don't get me wrong. I still think that's my favorite version of this. But yeah, that led me into this with interesting expectations because you said it was bad. And
did I say it was bad?
I know you said that it's not
it wasn't,
as good as the others.
I think I said it wasn't good, which I guess leaves bad.
My expectations played with me here a little bit because I was constantly being like, oh, it's funny. Like it's kind of bad. Like it's not great. The effects are kind of wonky, but I actually
99.
I enjoyed myself watching this movie enough. But some of the performances are a little weird, and it does have, I think it's a throwback. I think maybe in the 90s, people didn't pick up fully that it was a throwback to The Haunting. So it may have felt a little like schlocky at that time. Like it was too old school for that audience. And now I watch it and I'm like, oh, interesting, Liam Neeson and Owen Wilson and Catherine Zeta-Jones, like interesting cast. This set design, immaculate. Unbelievable. The stage work, the what they made out of this mansion, this giant castle. A lot of it was sets and some of it was on location, but oh my God, I was like the level of detail and like I'm like, we don't have sets like this anymore. Nobody makes this, because I came to find out that this cost $13 million in 1999, which is somewhere equivalent to like $25 million in creating sets. which is just
Okay,
unheard of in today's day and age. It's crazy.
Wow. Okay, so a lot to react to there. I still don't think this is a good movie. But I will grant that for at least the first half, I was thinking like this is better than I gave it credit for. And I think what happens is this movie, I mean, it has this sort of vibe throughout, but it really goes into what I'm going to call Disney's The Haunting of Hill House. It feels like The Haunted Mansion, like Disney's The Haunted Mansion. It starts to become a thrill ride, but in that very Disney-esque way where it's like, it's just kind of silly. It seems like it's for kids. And everything kind of had that look of like, this isn't supposed to convince anybody this is a real thing. And instead, we're going to make everything very over the top.
Yeah. It's kind of Hollywood. The way that it was lit, too. Everybody's got a big, massive hair light. And it's like...
It's very overlit. I kept thinking, like, why is everything so bright in this movie? They're walking down all these hallways at night. It's supposed to be scary. And you can see every inch of everything.
Because they spent so much money on the production design, Luke.
Yeah, I guess. And like, I will grant you, I kept thinking like, well, this does look pretty good. Like the sets look pretty good. Like the bedrooms, all those look good. When they're in that main room, I'm like, holy shit, this is huge. It's elaborate, but it also felt more like a castle than a house. And I know The Haunting of Hill House, like it kind of plays with like, it's always very big and ostentatious. But I think that one of my key things I picked up on early was this place is pretty beautiful. And Eleanor is like, struck by how beautiful it is. And that's the wrong note for The Haunting of Hill House. She is supposed to think the house is gross. She's supposed to feel sick when she looks at it at first. And then maybe over time she starts to change her attitude, but her very first reaction is that how wrong the house is. And so you lose all of that. And instead, she's just kind of blown away by the opulence of it. And that's because we're setting up this arc for her where she is the hero of the story who's going to do battle with Crane with her, like, the power of her heritage because he is actually her grandfather and, like, all this shit. And I was... I didn't realize... Because I had forgotten some of this stuff. And, like, the fact that we were setting this up early, I think is where a lot of the mistakes are made. Because, again, early on in the movie, I'm like, there's some interesting bones here. I can see what they're playing with. The idea of the psychological study, they really lean into that more, I think, than even the book does, where it's like... No, the doctor here, I think they changed his name again, so I forget what his name is in this version, but he is, he's putting on this test where he's going to test their fear response, and he's trying to create group hysteria, and whenever I hear that, I'm like, oh, cool, we can play with, like, the whole, is it real? Is it something that's in someone's mind? Is it being imagined? And, like, that area of horror I always find very interesting, where, like, even the characters themselves don't know whether or not it's real, but this movie is just, like, kind of dispenses with that whole thing pretty early on, and instead we just look at the characters who aren't believing shit as being kind of ridiculous because the examples are all super obvious and in your face of it being real. And then, yeah, about halfway through the movie, we've given up all thought about maybe this is real or maybe this isn't. This is 100%, like, the walls are warping, there's snakes coming out of the, there's a hand coming out and grabbing you and throwing you in a pool. Like,
I have some details here. So they didn't have the rights to make a remake of the original film. So they had to, like, readapt this work and change it. And
Whoa. I don't understand how this legally goes around that. If you don't have the rights to do it, this is still called The Haunting. They're still doing the same basic setup. How did they get around like, legally, how does that work?
All I saw in my research is this isn't a remake of Robert Weiss's classic, as the production company did not have the remake rights. They were not allowed to replicate even one shot from the 1963 film. Instead, it's a new adaptation of Shirley Jackson's novel.
Which is funny because I kept thinking, like, did these people even read the book?
Dude, and that's the thing, right? That was going to be my point is...
It feels much more like a remake of the movie.
It's not Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. It just isn't. They heard that there was a haunted house, and they're like, oh, let's make a haunted house movie. Like you're saying, Disney's Haunted Mansion, that sort of thing. They leaned into it so far that the house has eyes. It's reaching out. And I know that's meant to be like Crane's influence on the house.
Crane looks like the fucking Wolfman.
Yeah.
Like he looks way larger than life.
In pictures as well. Not even just like...
No, yeah, this is how he looks.
He's got like a Wolfman look, yeah.
Giant portrait right at the top of the stairs that like we keep looking at as if he's in the like room with them and like glowering because he looks all evil and wolf-like.
Yeah.
Like it's so unsubtle. Everything about this movie is unsubtle. It hits you over the head constantly.
Yeah, I got to give you some major details here as we're getting into this. So,
Okay.
Stephen King wrote the first draft of the script.
Wow.
When it fell through, he then reworked it and created something called Rose Red, which I think is a show or a movie. I'm not familiar.
It's a show. I think it was a mini series, maybe,
Yeah.
that kind of adapted multiple things. I remember reading about this connection to The Haunting of Hill House. We talked about how he says it's one of the
Huge fan.
scariest novels he's ever read. I think it's one of his favorite novels, one of
Yeah.
his most foundational. So that makes sense. He's a massive fan.
Yeah, so that was interesting. That just to start there, Stephen King was involved in a Shirley Jackson adaptation as the adapter, as the screenplay writer. Amazing. I'm like, okay, wow.
So before you get into it, like, I just predict, like, some stuff went really wrong in this production because when I saw the bones of what they were working with early, I kept thinking, like, this could have been a good movie, but it seems like something happened along the way to push it into this, like, really schlocky, over the top, unsubtle area where we're going to lean into these hammy performances. Owen Wilson's going to be doing his Owen Wilson shtick. Like, this is the most Owen Wilson performance I think I've ever seen from him.
Wow.
And he says that so many times. Catherine Zeta-Jones is there just, like, overly sexualized. Her character, her version of Theo is so over the top and ridiculous.
I was trying to figure out if this was like a woman kind of taking hold of her sexuality and taking that agency, but then I was the more that it leaned into it in the film, I was like, she's just purely meant to be an objectified here.
They wanted her to come off that way, but that is not what was happening, because I remember when this movie came out, this was right in the height of, like, I don't know if you remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, that area, like, Catherine Zeta-Jones was the hot, woman of the time. Everybody wanted her in the movies. She was in any movie she was in. The trailers were always showing her, like, doing hot stuff in the movie. And that was exactly in this trailer for this movie. We, like, kept seeing her in her, like, scantily clad clothing and to put butts in seats, try and get people to come see the movie. And then we had Liam Neeson going, "Does he think this is a game?" That was in the trailer for sure. When I heard that line, I was like, I remember that being in the trailer.
Yeah. Another influence that I think you're feeling in this film too, and you're saying you're calling it Disney, but I think it's something a little bit different. Steven Spielberg was heavily involved in the production of this film. So I think what you're sensing is that sort of like E.T. vibe. Like a sort of like a lighter.
I like E.T. though. Like,
I love E.T.
Like, it's somebody came in and decided they wanted to make this into a big budget, money making blockbuster film.
Yeah, I'm getting.
And
to
they
it.
had, and apparently it was Spielberg, but they had some ideas about, like, what that has to be for that to happen, and maybe it was financially successful, so maybe it worked. But as far as, like, being a good movie, I think it kind of poisoned it.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump to the end so that I can fill you in. But Steven Spielberg was so disgusted by the quality of the final product of the film that he removed his name and ensured that the credit made no single mention of him.
Okay, so he influenced it, but not good. Wow, that's Stephen Spielberg.
Yeah. And wait till I tell you about the filmmaker, because this is gonna blow your mind, man. This is such a wild space to be working in here. Steven Spielberg was admittedly a fan of the original Robert Wise film. So he's involved and on board for that. I think his Amblin production company was heavily involved in this as well. And now I'll take you all the way back and we'll talk about the filmmaker and how things worked their way out. Jan de Bont is a Dutch retired cinematographer, director, and film producer. He is best known for directing the films Speed in 1994 and Twister in 1996.
Okay, interesting.
As a director of photography...
Both very special effects heavy movies. Both are pretty good, though. I think both those movies
I would say
up.
Iconic for the 90s, too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
For the time, absolutely iconic.
I think I would still watch those movies today as well. Like, pretty fun movies overall. Like, I think fairly simple ideas from the get-go, but like executed well.
There are some really hokey like moments in both of those movies that will always stick with me, but like overall solid story.
I mean, the idea of a bus that can't slow down is inherently fucking stupid, but then he turned it into a fun movie.
But it was cool. Like that's fine. It's the bridge jumping or the gap jumping scene that is fucking ridiculous.
Sure.
Or the floating cow from Twister, and like there's certain moments that are just ridiculous.
But again, iconic in ways, like that floating cow, iconic.
Yeah.
As a director of photography, de Bont worked on numerous blockbusters and genre films. His early works were made while studying at the Amsterdam Film Academy with Dutch avant-garde director Adrian de Voorst. He first became known in the Netherlands as the cinematographer for the infamous 1971 film Blue Movie, followed by the 1973 film Turkish Delight, directed by Paul Verhoeven, starring Rutger Hauer and Monique van de Ven.
Verhoeven. Have you seen either of those movies? I
haven't. No. This is set up to get to some of the connections that he works with often. I haven't seen either of those. Those are Dutch films, I believe.
Got to get on it, man. Got to watch those Dutch films.
I know, man. The Dutch films from 1970s. I really need to fill in that gap. Since the early 80s, he has worked frequently in Hollywood, often collaborating with directors including Verhoeven and John McTiernan.
Okay. Two podcast favorites.
Here we go. Or at least podcast recurring guests, recurring people.
Hey, I have a lot of respect for Verhoeven, and McTiernan made one of my favorite movies. So.
Yeah, totally. So he made his move into directing in '94 with Speed, but I'm going to run off some of the things he was a cinematographer for that you will have heard of. In 1983, he was the director of photography for Cujo. 1985, Flesh and Blood, Paul Verhoeven film. 1988, director of photography on Die Hard with John McTiernan.
Wow, okay.
1989, Black Rain, director of photography with Ridley Scott. 1990, The Hunt for Red October, John McTiernan again.
Okay. Another project of ours.
Flatliners, Joel Schumacher film. I'm sure you've seen.
Uh-huh. I think I did, yeah.
1992, director of photography on Lethal Weapon 3 and Basic Instinct. Again, Paul Verhoeven. Wow. That's just to talk about him as a director of photography. Then we move into what he's directed. Speed, Twister we've talked about. Then Speed 2, which is where things take a turn. Speed 2 was nominated for Golden Raspberry Award for the worst picture that year, worst director, worst screenplay. Now, I hate the Raspberry Award in general, but I do think that like for some people who maybe miss Speed 2 Cruise Control that doesn't have Keanu in it, it's not anywhere close to the first one.
I know that movie had a lot of production woes. I think I saw something talking about there was a huge special effects moment in that that's actually pretty cool, where they constructed a fake like entire city front and then ran a real boat into it because they're insane and they spent an insane amount of money to do it. It was full. It was life size. They had an actual car. It was an actual like cruise ship front. I think it might have been not an actual cruise ship, but it was full size. And they recreated a city and rammed a boat into it for that shot. It's insane. There were actual stunt guys on the deck of the ship as it was hitting the city. Insane,
ridiculous. 1997 was a totally different world in filmmaking. 99.
That was in a Corridor Crew episode. If anybody's curious about it, go look it up. It was very interesting. As much as that movie isn't good, that was quite a shot.
Yeah. So 1999, he directed The Haunting, which we're talking about today. Also nominated for Worst Director for a Razzie. And again, not a fan of that award at all.
What happened, man?
Yeah. Then he goes on to be a producer on Minority Report, another project we've covered.
Okay, yeah.
And then his last
good movie.
His last feature that he directed was Lara Croft Tomb Raider: The Cradle of Life. So the second one.
I don't think I saw that, but I remember everybody not liking it.
He was also attached for a while in the 90s to the Godzilla that came out in the 90s, and then Roland Emmerich eventually replaced him, but the studio refused to approve his budget request for that film, so he walked.
So what happened with this movie?
This one, it sounds like King wrote that original screenplay, then someone else came in, completely reworked it, and then they went off of that script, and then along the way, I don't know why, but at some point, maybe it had to do with how much money they were pouring into it, or that it just wasn't working, but Spielberg was not happy with the cut assembled by Jean de Bont and ordered reshoots to be done against de Bont's wishes, which put more emphasis on the house itself and more visual effects than the psychological story that de Bont was trying to tell. Spielberg prevailed at the end and would be the one involved in the post-production of the film. So really interesting. Sounds like a film, Spielberg's involved, very strong vision. We know who Spielberg is as a filmmaker. We know he goes for these like very, he tries to find the heart of a movie. But then it sounds like he was also leaning into like, we're talking like after Jurassic Park, he's seen the success of some of these visual effects. Maybe he wants to try to do that.
Trying to do his big blockbuster
in a film like that. And then he takes away a film from someone else and takes over. And I've heard he like did a reshoot of a scene on his own without him involved, and then he got involved with the post-production process. So again, it sounds like this is two filmmakers trying to fight for their vision, and it's kind of turns into a mess at that point.
Yeah, and then you have another strong creative vision through Stephen King and his original screenplay. So not to mention the work itself that is clearly forgotten by a lot of people.
Yeah.
which is itself a very psychological. Like, I think a very psychological, quieter movie is always what this needs to be for it to work. This big special effects haunted mansion thing, this is not The Haunting of Hill House, and it shouldn't have been.
It gets to, and again, I said I had a good time with it, but it's like in a academic way. Like it was interesting to see some crazy different version of Haunting of Hill House, because this isn't Shirley Jackson's story. Like you said, there's no, where's the interiority at any point in this? And the turn to madness.
The very start of the movie, you start to think, oh, maybe it's gonna be a little bit psychological. Like, is she what's she imagining here? Was she seeing things? And and then that's as soon as she shows up at the house and she loves it and it's beautiful. Like, I'm like, okay, we're losing it immediately. And then just from there, it gets worse and worse. And for a moment, you start to think maybe she's just imagining all of this, but I didn't even believe that. And then it's like, no, you shouldn't have, because that's not what's happening.
Yeah, and she goes from pretty much in full control to spiraling and completely lost within a scene or two. Like the twist is completely lost.
No, I didn't buy any of the performances, and like the selling Nell's descent is so important for that character to work. But then also the problem is it's not a descent in this movie. She is learning to communicate with these children who they introduced this plot line about all these like hundreds of children apparently that Crane murdered, who are trying to communicate with her, and they're trying to like get her to come save them, and then she is their savior, and she's kind of the superhero of the movie. She's able to fight Crane and stand up to him and cast him down to hell for some reason. Like, why she's able to do this, I don't know. Just because she's related to him, I guess. All of this is what they actually are trying to set up with Nell's character. So how are you supposed to sell like a descent into madness where you're like being seduced by an evil house? That's not what this movie is. So at times it felt like they were dancing along that line, but like I see why it doesn't work, because that's not what the movie is. So of course it doesn't work.
Yeah. It moves so far away from Shirley Jackson's messaging and like what she was getting at. This idea of a place that has this power over you. And like you said before, is it real? Is it not real? Is such a fun game to play in a house like this. Yeah. And I think really early on, we see like spirity children, and we're like, okay, like halfway through the movie, we're like, it's all real, and we just have to lean into it. And then it doesn't help that the effects of the time were, they were trying to be cutting edge, but they just don't hold up today. So it's
pretty hokey. At times, stuff looked okay,
Yeah, that 63 film, they maybe, had the advantage of having to use their ingenuity to create ways to make us creepy.
It had to be subtle because they couldn't do unsubtle.
Exactly. So, and you've got like camera work that helps to display all that. And as much as this looked, just like location-wise, looked incredible. And again, some of this was on location, but some of the sets were some of the largest ever constructed for a film. So that just puts into context. You're like,
they were fucking huge.
They were so big that they had to be built in the hangar that housed the Spruce Goose, which was the mammoth airplane built by Howard Hughes.
Yeah.
So like some of the largest possible hangars that you could build something in.
But because they were so big and so over the top, it didn't sell me on this being an actual house. So the whole time it has that feel of like, none of this is real. This is all a set. It's very much a movie. And you just like, I don't know, like so much of The Haunting of Hill House is supposed to evoke that feeling you get when you're in an empty house and you hear a noise, and
or you feel like something's watching you. Yeah.
Why do I feel like there's somebody here with me, even though there's not? Like, especially old big houses, and like all of that gets lost when I feel like I'm on a movie set or I'm at an amusement park and I'm about to take a ride around a corner and see what the next thrill is. That whole thing just doesn't work for me. And I think even at the time, I remember walking out of it being like, that was kind of ridiculous. Crane is turned into the final boss. It's all about him. The house itself seems to be neutral. It's just Crane's haunting of it. That is, again, completely different than what we get in the book. Crane lived at the house, but the house was already evil. The house was a place of evil, and he just happened to live there. And then he became a part of the story, but he was not the progenitor of that. It wasn't about Crane haunting the house. It was about the house being evil.
And I was kind of hopeful, even leading up to the end, that we would get I guess there's a small amount that you can think that there was already a power in the house before Crane was there, because he gets like recaptured by it. But it doesn't seem evil. If anything, it seems like good. But yeah, the house, I was hopeful that like nearing the end, they would do some sort of thing where it wasn't Crane all along, but it was. It was just Crane's. Why does this guy have magic abilities once he's deceased?
He's just so evil, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's able to like continue to like torture and chase these children. The faces in the room at first worked for me, and then when they would like turn and look at her, that was creepy. I like that. And then it gets so over the top. By the end, they're like wailing,
open mouthed,
open mouths and
wide
moving
eyes.
constantly. And it's like even God. That like, it still looks pretty good, but it got silly at the end, And it's like that's how a lot of this stuff was. Like she fights a fucking gargoyle with like a I don't know, a poker or something, and she smacks it a couple times until it turns back into an inanimate object, and then she runs away. Like, what is even happening?
Yeah, what's up with the circus room, too? Like, you have a room in your house that just turns into a carnival circus at some point?
And then one where there's just a bunch of water, and you're, like, hopping down these, like, books that are in the water, but they're not real books, they're stepping stones. That's why I was like, this is a fucking amusement park. What is going on here? And then I guess that was supposed to be, like, for drawing in the children. The other thing is, like, if this guy is as dark as he is, and he's killing all these children and making them work here apparently, and this is all just for show and all that, like, we don't sell any of that as being like an actual thing. Like, it's all just face value, nothing, no depth there.
I honestly was like, what's the connection here? Like, why does it matter? She finds that book and she's looking at their ages, and I'm like, why does it matter? Like, so he lured a bunch of kids
How did they die?
Yeah.
It's unclear.
Burned, I guess?
Did they die in his sweatshop, or did he murder them?
Good question.
I don't know. And then the other thing is, like, I don't know. A lot of the scares are hokey. A lot of the jokes are cringy. Every time Catherine Zeta-Jones and Owen Wilson would be like making these little jokes, I don't know, man. Eye-rolly at best, and just full-on groan cringe at worst. It was. Well, at one point, Nell's like, "Oh, you mean what is Theo wearing?" And he's like, "Yeah, what is Theo wearing? Did you see what she was wearing yesterday? I guess I do have a soft spot for Theo." Like, he hits it so many times, again and again and again, and I'm like, we get it, man. You're just saying your like inner thoughts blatantly, just like characters walking around saying exactly what they're thinking. Nell wanders through the house talking to herself constantly. We're like, we're not going to do VO, so instead we're just going to have the character like awkwardly talk to themselves in every scene.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about Mike Flanagan coming to this property too, and how like he wanted to put his own spin on it. He was clearly making something very different from Shirley Jackson's, but I think you have to look at all the things that came before that were related to this work. And I could see a couple moments where I'm like, Flanagan maybe referencing some of this movie, even as much as like within the fabric of Haunting of Hill House. This probably isn't looked on as like a great thing, but I guarantee that there's like a little parts that
part of its legacy now. It was a big movie. So the assistant gets hit by the piano wire in the eye, and she's bleeding. For some reason, Catherine Zeta-Jones comes over and puts a little glass over her eye. Yeah. Like, here, this will keep the blood out.
Is that really that important?
It's like you have an eyelid that you could just close.
Yeah, so. Is that the most important thing when you get a cut around your eyes to keep the blood out of it too? Like, cup it.
Hold this glass with your eye. What the fuck?
Also, like when she gets put into the car and she's driving away, Liam Neeson like smiles. He's like smiling for some reason, and I'm just like, what is
his performance was bad. I mean, overall, just awkward. I didn't understand what he was doing with the character.
When the movie first started too, I found myself saying like, man, Liam Neeson doesn't do anything but these like action movies anymore. Like I would like to see Liam Neeson do like some dramas and stuff again. Like I'd like to see him around.
Yeah.
And then through this movie,
this was kind of around the time of Schindler's List, right? I guess a few years after.
Later, yeah. This was right around the time of Phantom Menace, right around the time of Episode 1 Star Wars. Yeah.
Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
Interesting, man. It was a weird time. Liam Neeson was this big star. Catherine Zeta-Jones. Yeah, I mean, so my point of bringing up that bloody scene, that's like the only blood in the movie. Like the only blood coming from a character. And that felt like, dare I say, kind of like a Stephen King thing. Like that, maybe that was left over from that original script. But then the two assistants leave. And then the only other moment we even get like that is, I guess, when Owen Wilson gets his fucking head knocked off, and it looks so silly. What the hell was that?
Oh my god, it was funny. I felt like Owen Wilson was the one who was like sort of the least like I like Owen Wilson too, but it just felt weird for him to be in this movie.
Yeah, very. He was just this weird comic relief. He's just Owen Wilson. He's not like they didn't give him any character really.
No. Yeah, and then like you said, he gets this block knocked off, and I was like, "What is?" I thought everybody was gonna make it out of this movie, and then like a few people die, and I'm like, "Why? None of this has stakes. I don't care that he got his head knocked off.
Just Owen Wilson dies, I think.
No, well, Nell does too. At the end, she like fucking spirits away.
Oh yeah, I forgot that Nell dies. Yeah, she just like her spirit leaves her body in a super hokey looking scene and joins all the children.
Yeah, she's really happy to join those kids though. She's all smiles.
And I guess that's because Nell dies at the end of the book, and so they felt like they needed to keep that. But like we've gotten so far away from the book now, people.
Yeah.
And we've lost the plot so badly that you do not need to do this at this point.
Just call it something different, and I think that you have less expectations, and people can be like, "Oh, is this really, funny, dumb little, horror movie that like I think most will forget?" But then you tie it into the legacy of like these other things that are arguably great. It's hard for it to stand up against those things.
I think if you're a massive fan of the novel and you're a big fan of the other movie, like you really hate this adaptation. And then I think just as like a moviegoer who has no prior experience to it and doesn't know the book, it's just not a very good movie in general.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. It's one of those scenarios where you get a lot of people involved. Sounds like, Spielberg, King, a lot of people touch this. And then like for it to just kind of be a waste of a lot of people's time and be kind of forgettable is like, oof, And then all that money spent on production design, I'm never going to stop talking about that. It's insane.
And like some of it looked pretty good. So, the movie had enough going for it, and like I said, you could see the bones of some interesting study, like this interesting idea of like this fear study, and I was like, oh, what is he actually doing? Maybe he wrote the words, or what's going on here? Like what was he actually doing to drive the fear? And it was apparently kind of nothing. He just kind of like told a story to them, and that was it. I don't know, man. Like I wanted this. There's some bones of a good version early, and it just all got dispensed with. And I kept hoping you were going to come and tell me about this, like, poor guy who, like, this was his first movie he ever did, and, like, didn't have the experience and got strong-armed by the production company, and I could be like, oh, it's their fault, it's the studio's fault and all this stuff. But, like, there's so many talented people who worked on this movie. This should not have happened. This should not have been as bad as it was.
Yeah, I think just mismanaged, and things got away from them. And so that's the other thing that I wanted to bring up too, is like originally John DeBont was in pre-production for Minority Report, and Steven Spielberg was in pre-production for this, and they swapped projects.
Weird.
Yeah, so weird and bizarre. Tom Cruise, I think specifically because Tom Cruise became available for Minority Report, Spielberg jumped onto that and was like, all right, this is my movie, that's your movie. And then like still had some input, and man, I don't know. It doesn't look, the other story about this that we have for a movie that is much better than this is Poltergeist, where supposedly Spielberg came in and like ghost directed it.
Oh yeah,
the way that worked
drama
out.
Drama around that.
So maybe that's like the precedent, is like that sort of thing happened again here, but this time it just did not work out.
Yeah, better movie. I haven't seen it in a long time, but my memory of that is it's actually being pretty scary.
It's fun. And to talk about
scary
fun,
and kind of over the top.
But to talk about fun here, I think that this is the kind of like, we're getting into this season right now. If you want to just have something on, and you've seen this movie before, I can understand, because I have horror movies that are like this, right? Not necessarily this, I don't know, disjointed or bad, but like I think of something like Sleepy Hollow. That granted, it's like
Sleepy Hollow is better.
It's better than this, like I said, yeah. But it's like also that kind of thing. Like it's kind of spooky. It's got a little bit of a vibe to it. It's not hard to watch. It's very accessible.
It has a good vibe.
Yeah. So this movie has like some of that going for it. So you could be forgiven for being like, you know what? It's a guilty pleasure kind of movie. But for me, I was just like, man, with the expectations I went in, I was like, hopefully it'll be fairly good. And I really expected it to be kind of a train wreck based on what you said. And then I walked away being like, it was fine. It just, I'm not going to remember it, I'm sure, but it was fine.
I don't know, man. I wanted to walk away thinking that, but I ended up just getting angry about it because I like the source material too much now. I like the original movie too much now that this just feels like such an insult. So one example I wanted to give of like this movie clearly being disjointed, and I don't know how this made it through, but there's the moment in Nell's room where she sees Hugh Crane's face in the glass, and she throws something at him. It breaks the glass, and then the glass like shatters and sprays into the room. I think this is the same scene, but it's the scene where the eyes open, and it looks like the house is like glowering at her, and she's on the bed.
The like spikes come down and like pin her down, which was weird.
No, okay, so I'm confusing two scenes. There's two moments like that. I think the second one is where the spikes come down, but the first one's where just the eyes are there. She gets glowered at. And then I think she runs away, and the scene ends. But before she runs away, And after she's had all this moment, she goes, "Who was holding my hand?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, there was no mention of a handhold. There was no hand holding happening at all.
But that was from the book.
Nothing about the scene has implied that someone was holding her hand, and she just shouts that. And I'm like, that's from a different movie or just a line from the book that they filmed when they thought the scene was going to be different, and they left that in the film when it literally refers to nothing.
Yep, I noticed that as well. I think that we're supposed to just assume. I think in the edit they were like, they'll assume that one of the kids grabbed her hand. But like, yeah, we never get an answer on that.
We don't see anything with the hand, nothing.
But that was definitely from the book. I'm almost positive I remember that happening in the book.
Oh no, I know it definitely happens in the book. It's a chilling moment in the book. But that's not what this scene is. And so it's so bizarre that somehow still made it in. Just a weird mess of a movie. It feels very 90s in some ways, though. Like, it feels very of the time, like big hammy performances.
It's funny because it's like kind of not fair. I feel like 90s blockbusters for sure. Because it's not fair to some 90s movies.
Exactly. Yeah. Certain kinds of movies. Yeah. There's a bunch of great movies in the 90s, obviously. But yeah. It was like, these days you'll look at people, fairly or unfairly, will look at a lot of the like superhero movies of the last 10 years, and they'll say that like that kind of defines big movies of the time. And like you'll look at like the bad examples of that as being these like, oh, this is when it was bad, right? And I think like in this era, it was a different kind of blockbuster that was dominating. And there were good versions of it, but then there were these subpar versions that kept coming out that were trying to capitalize on that same mode.
Yeah, I have an example of one that I actually like a lot, and that's The Mummy with Brendan Fraser, and how that kind of feels like this kind of movie. There's some action, there's some adventure.
Much better movie.
Like the performances are pretty broad and pretty large.
This is a bad version of that, where they're trying to make it's like a creature feature. Where, it's about this ghost guy, and that's what I'm sure he was in the trailers, and it was like, we're gonna see some people do battle with a house, and it's gonna be like literally doing battle with a house, and Liam Neeson in it, look, he's an action star, and even though he doesn't really have any like action moments in this movie at all,
he cuts his hand.
He was just kind of there. Intense. It was very weird.
Yeah, a lot of the things were just like the beats were so weird. Like there was he cuts his hand on the window, and they're like, he cut his hand, get it out, and they like make a big moment of like pulling it out of his hand, and it's like, what? That had that didn't have any impact at any point. He just wrapped it up and then they moved on.
That was right before Owen Wilson got picked up by a rug, thrown into the fireplace, and then got his head knocked off by this like lion flu thing.
Yeah.
So bizarre. Oh, and then there was that moment where she's like in the fireplace looking at the bones, and she finds the skull, and then like the whole skeleton pops up, and she screams and runs out, and I'm like, what just happened? What was that?
Yeah. The house.
It was just an empty jump scare, I guess, because that's what this movie was. It didn't take itself seriously at all, and I'm not talking about that in a fun way. I'm talking about that in a like, it didn't care, so why would we care kind of thing. I don't know, man. I guess the ultimate question is, did it make money?
It did make money.
There you go.
Yeah.
So somebody was happy about it, I guess. The studio.
But like I said, at the end of the day, it won like Razzies, so it was like known to be one of the worst movies of the year.
Yeah. It was shoehorned in at the end where she's like, that's not what this is about. This is about family.
I could not believe that.
This is all about family. This is my grandpa. Grandpa, you have to let them go. It's like, what is even happening?
Way too much. And to tie it into family that much, like, takes away from like so it was like faded. This was like a faded thing rather than, it's much more scary and I think meaningful when it's not like, it's all about our family lineage, and that's why this all continued on, and I'm here to save the day.
So weird. Maybe the creepiest scene I thought was when she looks in a mirror, and she sees this like double of herself, and it looks wrong, and it's doing like kind of a weird version of her, but it's like not her, and that was actually a genuinely creepy like double moment. And she's like, "That's not me," and like I was like, "Oh, cool." I like that. And then like she runs into the like merry-go-round room next, and then she sees like a weird version of herself that gets like pregnant in a very silly looking way, and like it ruins all of it when it does that. So it's like it just can't get out of its own way. Even when it does do something decently well, it follows it up with something that's over the top and ridiculous. It was so jumbled and like it felt lazy at a point. It's like they just gave up on trying to make this movie make sense or be scary. And they just got it out, I guess. I don't know, man. These are the kind of movies I think that give Hollywood a bad name. too, you know? Like when people complain about Hollywood, it's like this kind of stuff, this like laziness, this lack of attention to detail. And I know that's not the case. Like I've seen enough amazing movies and know that's not the case, but like this is the kind of shit that you know, people will pull out and be like, look at the state of, you know, movies today.
Yeah. It's some people are there to punch a time card, you know what I mean? Some people are very blessed and they get into good situations and they, you know, they get to make the most of it. And then others are just like, hey, I'm just gonna, you know, at some point too, like the actors, like I don't even blame actors in some scenarios where it just like they can tell what the movie is around them and they're like, hey, I'm just here to, you know.
The movie was so poorly written. The lines they're giving, I'm like, oh, what are you gonna do, man? It's all bad.
It's also tough too. It's another great example of like when I talk about like any movie getting made and being good is a fucking miracle. Like because more often there's such a higher chance that you end up with a scenario like something like this. But for the budget, it's unacceptable. You know, for the budget and the people involved, like this shouldn't happen. And I think I would like to think that this happens less in some ways, but you know, there's still movies like this that get made all the time. So
Mr. Dudley comes back at the end with Mrs. Dudley,
who were like completely written out of the story. They were in it.
They
for
show
two
up at
scenes.
the end and she's like, city people. And he goes, did you find out what you wanted to know, doctor? And then that's the end of the movie.
And they walk off. They literally don't get in the car. They walk. They're just like, we're going to walk 9 miles to the closest town.
What is even happening, man, at the end of this movie? Anyway, I felt like we needed to cap this one off just to like have our full view now of The Haunting, and I think this is all of its adaptations now, unless I missed one. But man, it's definitely the low point. You know, I love that book so much. It truly was one of my favorite things we've read on the podcast. I really loved it. And the Flanagan adaptation, I went on a journey with. I was very on the fence, but then by the end, I was in love with it, and I really liked it. The original Haunting, the older one, you know, I like that movie a lot. Have a lot of respect for it. So it's been all good, and that's kind of why I've been holding off on this one, because I knew it was going to be kind of a bad part. But I wanted to get it out there. I wanted you to see it so you could have the full scope of The Haunting and The Haunting of Hill House now.
Selfishly, I appreciate this kind of stuff. You know, I think you got to take the bad with the good and figure out what they did wrong, move on from that, and you know, take that with a grain of salt. That's where I'm at with it. I didn't even necessarily like. There have been movies that I put on that I'm like unwatchable. I got to shut this off. Granted, there are probably some people that would do that to this film, but I was like, you know, it's time to get into spooky spirit a little bit. It's fun to like, even if it's like a schlocky kind of like super B, C, like D movie, like I'm down to check it out and see where it's at.
The ratings are going lower and lower. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you, man. That's why I chose it, because I was like, oh, it's about to be October. I was in the spirit, so I wanted to watch something like this. But by the time I was done with it, I was like, I actually want to watch like a good, scary, haunted movie now. Like, it just made me want to go watch some good horror, because that's not it, man.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to be it for this month. Until next time.
Keep adapting.